Interestingly, it looks like meditation is one of the amazing things that you do for your brain to prevent aging, or at least cellular and cognitive aging. You can't help time moving forward, but you can stay strong while it does. In a study by Dr. Eileen Luters, she looked at long-term meditators and looked at their brain in an MRI compared to those people who didn't meditate. And what she was able to see was that long-term meditators had brains that looked on average 7.5 years younger than non-meditators. So this is really significant. The act of meditating and maintaining a meditation practice actually reverse ages your brain, like actually makes your brain look significantly younger. And her definition of a long-term meditator was somebody who'd meditated for 5 years or more. So an investment of 5 years or more produced, in some cases, a brain that looked 7.5 years younger. So it's an incredibly powerful tool to stave off the aging of your brain.
Hello, Ariel. You are the co-founder and chief evangelist at Interaxon. So that's the company behind Muse, the Muse meditation devices. So welcome to Modern Healthspan, and thank you so much for coming back to the channel.
Oh, thank you, Richard. It's a joy and pleasure to be here again.
Thank you so much. So, Ariel, for people who may not be familiar with Muse, the company, could you introduce the company and what its mission is?
Sure. So Muse creates devices that help you track, train, and improve your brain. Um, our initial devices were the Muse 1 and Muse 2, which taught you to meditate. Then we branched out into the Muse S, which also helped you sleep and can track your sleep as effectively as a sleep lab. And now we have a new device, Muse S Athena, that combines multiple modes of tracking and training your brain with EEG and fNIRS, a phenomenal new technology, which I'm sure we'll talk all about.
We will. Yes, congratulations on getting the device out, getting the device out into the market. It must have been a lot of work. And so, yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
And so what has been added? So you talked about that you're using this new technology to what was it? fMIRS.
fNIRS. Yeah,
fMIRS.
so fNIRS stands for frontal near infrared spectroscopy. So in the past, our devices have used EEG, electrical sensors that track your brainwave activity. And our new devices contain both EEG and fNIRS, which actually tracks the blood flow to the brain. So, in the same way that a fMRI is able to track your bold response, your oxygenation response, when there's a part of your brain that is working, it draws oxygen and blood to it. And an fMRI is able to see the parts of your brain that are working during an activity based on how much oxygenated blood is there. With an fNIRS, we do the same thing, but it's a tiny, tiny little device that is just emitting light on your forehead, and it's able to look at the level of oxygenated blood just at the surface of your brain, at your blood-brain barrier, and it's able to detect when your prefrontal cortex is working and demanding more oxygen.
Just out of interest, do you know what the wavelength is of the light? It's near infrared, so I assume it's around the 800 or 1,000.
Yep, so we have two different wavelengths that we use, 730 and 813. And it's likely that there is also a photobiomodulatory effect of those wavelengths. I know you've had other guests that have talked at length about PBM, photobiomodulation, and its effect to upregulate cytochrome C, increase mitochondrial function. And so it is quite likely that as the Muse S Athena is reading your prefrontal blood flow oxygenation, it's also giving you a mild PBM effect and upregulating your function in that area.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so but because it's near infrared, then it is getting through the skull and it's reading the blood flow actually in the brain. And So, and it can tell the difference between oxygenated and deoxygenated blood and the rate of flow.
You've got it. So there's a central emitter that emits the two wavelengths of light. That wavelength of light actually makes its way through your skin, through the dura, the pia mater, and right to the blood-brain barrier, where it is able to look at the level of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood flowing in that region. And as your brain demands more oxygen by working, you have an increase in oxygenated blood coming to that area, as well as an increase in deoxygenated blood because you've been using up that oxygen. Um, and so that's able to indicate how much your prefrontal cortex is working. And we have sensors on the left and on the right. So you can see, for example, your left prefrontal cortex versus right. And then we also have exercises that help you train your prefrontal cortex to use more oxygen and demand more nutrients coming to it.
Yes. So tell me about that. So there's a new addition to the application, which kind of works based on how hard you're concentrating.
Pretty much, yes. So it's a new form. It's a form of neurofeedback called prefrontal cortex, fNIRS neurofeedback, and it's been demonstrated to be extremely effective at helping you improve your attention and improve the function of your prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain responsible for our attention, our inhibition, our ability to have higher order processing and planning, and wise thought. And that part of our brain, as we age, unfortunately shrinks. But if you're able to do exercises and engage your prefrontal cortex, you can maintain the thickness of your prefrontal cortex as you age. And so Athena offers the ability to do neurofeedback exercises to strengthen your prefrontal cortex.
One of the things is that there is an idea that if you play memory games or whatever, then it would improve your memory. But the translation of that has always been difficult. So, do you see better translation with this kind of, I guess, more direct
Yep. So
training?
there are quite a number of studies demonstrating the impact of prefrontal cortex neurofeedback, and they demonstrate transfer effects. So you not only get quote unquote better at the game, in this case, the game is you're making an owl fly. As you focus on it and upregulate your prefrontal cortex activity, the owl flies faster. And research has shown that prefrontal cortex neurofeedback not only makes you better at the game, the activity, but also makes you better at other aspects of your life. So there really is a transfer effect.
So I could wear this device when I'm working, and it would give me some idea of how hard I was working. I mean, so one thing I thought about, would it help me to determine what would be my optimal Pomodoro time?
That's a great question. So the device is new, and we don't have studies that really demonstrate that it can be used perfectly in that way. Um, but you can wear it during activities and start to track your EEG, your prefrontal cortex, and start to just see the patterns and observe. We're too early on to be able to make assessments about that kind of ad hoc usage and what it might mean, but it can start to give you insight and sort of lay ground for you to ask questions and experiment and explore.
Excellent. So I saw on the new application, there's a thing called Alpha Peak, right? Which is some kind of a measure that the device provides. So can you talk about what is Alpha Peak? What are you measuring to estimate this value or to calculate the value?
Sure. So, with the new Muse app, so with any of the Muse devices in the Muse app, you can now measure your alpha peak frequency. And after you do 10 meditation sessions with Muse, we are tracking your EEG through those meditation sessions, and we're able to come up with a value that reflects one aspect of your cognition, and that is your alpha peak frequency. So, alpha peak is really interesting. So we talk about alphas being from 8 to 12 hertz, which means that some people's alpha peak is closer to 8 hertz, some people's alpha peak is closer to 12 hertz. And throughout the day, there's also a variation in exactly how fast your alpha frequency is. Some people even have two peaks, a bigger peak at, say, 10 and then a smaller peak. And what we were able to discover looking at our database of large data was that the alpha peak shifts reliably decade by decade. So, in a very early paper actually written with Dr. Alison Sekuler, she's currently the VP of Research at Baycrest Hospital and the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. She and her team wrote a paper using the insights from our database demonstrating that, and you can kind of think about alpha peak as the refresh rate on the brain. So if the refresh rate of your computer screen is really fast and it's flashing at like 60 less frequently, less quick refresh rate, and it becomes kind of PC feeling or hard to, it no longer feels, congruent and smooth. And so one theory is that alpha is kind of like the refresh rate on the brain, and the faster your alpha peak frequency, the more able you are to process ideas quickly and coherently. And so it's interesting to use alpha peak as a measure for yourself to sort of check in on how is my brain doing? What are the practices that I do that can increase my alpha peak frequency, that decrease it? How is it in the morning versus the evening? And start to kind of build a different relationship with understanding the function of your own brain.
So, do you see that either meditation or this concentration in the Athena, um, the prefrontal
Prefrontal cortex,
prefrontal cortex,
neurofeedback, yeah.
neurofeedback, do either of these help move the alpha peak in a good direction?
So one of the things that we've seen with meditation, so you've Muse's meditation app has been out for over a decade, and I should describe for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about. If you're Muse offers a beautiful meditation experience that gives you real-time feedback on your brain during meditation. So the Muse is able to track your brain activity while you meditate and let you know when your mind is wandering and when you're focused. And it does that through audio feedback based on your EEG. And a large component of what we're looking at in that meditation state is your alpha. We're looking at the power of your alpha, so how much of your brain is in alpha at any moment, as well as the frequency. And what we see is that people who regularly engage in meditation, particularly with Muse, which is giving you alpha neurofeedback during your meditation, that these individuals have improved brain characteristics that are associated with being more focused and more calm throughout the day. And we also see improvements in characteristics of your life. So increased calm. There are a number of studies that demonstrate things like reduced stress, reduced burnout, reduced fatigue, improved cognition. All of these because you are both getting the benefit of meditation and you're getting the benefit of alpha neurofeedback, which is actually allowing your brain characteristics to improve over time.
So I saw that you also have a brain recharge score on the app. Is that particular to the Athena, or will all the devices provide that? And can you explain what what it's measuring?
Sure. So all the devices will give you the brain recharge score. And what that's looking at is how your alpha performed in your last meditation session. And so that is giving you an indication of how recharged your brain has been. So how, ready your brain is, how much it was able to get into alpha, stay in high alpha, and therefore kind of like a good night's sleep, how refreshed or recharged your brain might be afterwards. It's when you're referring to terms like, a recharged or refreshed brain, we don't really have good language for it. But it's indicating that you spent a good amount of time in alpha, you had strong alpha, and that the literature suggests that your brain is now more recharged or ready to go on to the next task.
Did you know that over 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium, a mineral involved in over 600 biochemical reactions? And there are 7 forms of magnesium. each with distinct physiological targets. That's why I take Magnesium Breakthrough from BiOptimizers. It's the only full spectrum formula with all 7 forms. Chelate for muscle recovery, citrate for arterial health, bisglycinate for digestion, malate for energy production, sucrosomial for immune function, taurate for cardiovascular health, and orotate for metabolic optimization. Clinical research confirms that organic magnesiums like citrate and malate have higher bioavailability than the common oxide forms found in most supplements. Different forms target specific tissues. Taurate, malate, and citrate show neurological benefits, which is why Magnesium Breakthrough users report dramatic improvements in stress response and sleep quality. If you want to try Magnesium Breakthrough, go to bioptimizers.com/modern and enter promo code modern10 to get 10% off any order. And if you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, you will make sure your monthly supply is guaranteed. Thank you for your support. Your device is, I think, the only device which combines these two ways of measuring into the same device. So is it being used in any clinical trials yet, or are you working with anyone on that?
Yeah, so we're incredibly lucky. There are a lot of researchers that use Muse. So, as much as many of you may be familiar with Muse as a consumer tool that you have in your own home to meditate and work on your brain health and sleep, it's equally used by clinicians and researchers. So, there's literally thousands of researchers that use Muse. There have been over 200 neuroscience papers published using the Muse device in journals like Nature and Frontiers in Neuroscience, like in really, really top journals. And now with the new Athena coming out, we have quite a number of research studies that will be using the Athena device because there is not, good options for multimodal EEG and fNIRS, not just in, consumer in your own home, but not even in a research lab. It's hard to acquire a multimodal EEG fNIRS device. They're incredibly expensive and uh, quite unattainable. So we've seen an amazing influx of researchers. And one of the kind of most common use cases for research now for Muse is as an at-home sleep tracking device. So in the past, if you were doing a study on, let's say, Alzheimer's or autism, and you wanted to measure the patient's sleep in their own home to see what the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's or autism does during the night, you'd have to send them to a sleep lab. They'd be there for one night and it would be incredibly expensive. And so now we have many, many researchers that actually use Muse for at-home sleep research. And there are currently, I think, 3 studies looking at children with autism being able to actually track their EEG while they sleep in their own home. One by the University of Bristol, which will be upcoming, another with Kennedy Krieger in the US, and more. And there are a number of studies also using Muse for Alzheimer's. There's several studies in Parkinson's, both using Muse as meditation tools interventionally to see if they can improve Parkinson's symptoms, as well as using them to track the daytime EEG and sleep of Parkinson's patients to start to identify changes in the brain in that condition. So it's being really, really widely used in research, which is an incredible honor and really quite amazing that, this tool that anybody can buy, that, you can go online and purchase and use easily yourself, really is a clinical grade research tool.
While we're talking about sleep, I did have one question. Oh, well, I had, yeah, one question. So with the new device, which is also measuring the blood oxygen level, so would this help detect sleep apnea?
So, the new Athena actually has 2 different uses for the sensors. So the EEG sensors track your sleep as effectively as the EEG of a sleep lab, and they're able to stage your sleep, the level of delta, the amount of REM sleep, etc. And then, so we have the emitter in the center, and we have these short fNIRS channels and then long channels. And the short channels we also use to get your SpO2. So not only are you getting the fNIRS, but you're getting SpO2, which is the oxygen perfusion of the blood in your vasculature. So the fNIRS is looking at your blood-brain barrier. The SpO2 is looking at the local blood flow in the skin. And that is one of the ways that you can diagnose OSA, obstructive sleep apnea. This is the moment where I say we're not FDA approved for diagnosing obstructive sleep apnea. It is something that our researchers will be using as part of their research because you don't need FDA approval for research. You go through an ethics board. Um, and over time, there may be indicators in the Muse app that might give you some indication of what your breath rate over at night is, and that may or may not be related to your obstructive sleep apnea, which you would definitely want to talk to a doctor about if you had.
Yes. Yeah, I saw
That's
the
my that's my
no,
very hand waving. I don't want to get in trouble with the FDA statement.
absolutely no. I understand that, and you do have to be very specific about what you say. Yeah, I did see that the sleep data is very detailed. I mean, it includes movement as well, um, motion and sleep levels.
Yeah, it's amazing what you're able to track in sleep when you have an EEG on your head. So around your wrist, you're not really looking at somebody's actual sleep, you're looking at their movement. The finger-borne sensors are looking at your PPG, so they're specifically looking at your heart rate and temperature, and then trying to guess what state of sleep you're in based on those. And only looking at the EEG is going to give you an accurate assessment of your sleep. So we're able to, like a sleep lab, let you know when you're in light sleep, when you're in deep sleep. We can actually tell you the depth of your deep sleep, not just how long you've been in deep sleep. When you're in REM. And then also there's the PPG sensor, which is tracking your heart rate. And there's the position sensors, which are able to show you the position that you're lying in overnight. And over time, you're also going to see more and more sensor modalities in that as we start to share the data, or as we start to come to better interpretation of the data from the hemodynamic sensors as well, from the fNIRS and the SpO2. So it's kind of like once you have it, we then, every time we innovate, we pass that innovation along. And one of the amazing innovations in the sleep product is not only does it track your sleep, but it also helps you improve it. So we have a 14 days of sleep program that comes for free in the app, and that teaches you everything that the basics of sleep hygiene, how to manage your thoughts around sleep, and it uses the digital sleeping pill, which is a tool that comes with the device that actually gives you bio and neurofeedback in a way that it helps your brain fall asleep faster. And studies have demonstrated that it improves your sleep quality by up to 20%. So it's another amazing tool.
Yes. I was thinking, does the application provide any advice or guidance based on your performance, either in the meditation or in the prefrontal cortex concentration?
Guidance in what sense?
Whether you're getting any better or
Yes, it totally provides that. So, when you meditate with Muse, you're getting both real-time feedback. So, you're actually hearing what your mind is doing during your meditation. You're hearing when you're focused on your breath when you're meditating and when your mind is wandering. And it guides you back to your state of focused attention. So, it's a super effective tool at getting you to start a meditation practice or deepen it. And then afterwards, you actually have data. You have charts and graphs and scores that show you what your brain was doing during your meditation, what your brain waves were doing, what your heart was doing during your meditation, scores that show you how calm you were. And all of that data is saved in each session in a dashboard that then lets you go back and track your improvements. So it's really common when somebody's meditating with Muse for them to say, like, oh, today I got 20 birds. It was a great meditation session. Like, people come and they show me their graphs. It's like, look how much I've improved. At the beginning, my mind was bouncing all over the place. And you can see after 20 sessions, I'm so calm. And then we have streaks, and people get really engaged because the idea of meditation is you want to do it every day. And so the gamification really makes it engaging to do it every day. And I have people come to me and say, look, I'm on my 2035th day streak. And so it's like, you can both see yourself improving and you have a mechanism that sort of keeps you engaged and accountable to do it day after day.
Did I see that the application now has the raw brainwave data graphs? Because I think they didn't used to be there.
Exactly. So the application keeps building and growing over time as we respond to people's requests for features and as the technology develops and makes it easier for us to innovate and deliver these tools into the app. So, I mean, if there's one problem with the app, it's that it is so big with so many things in it, it can almost be hard to find stuff because there's so much there. Because we just kind of keep building more stuff and giving it to you. And so now, anytime you do a session with Muse, not only do you get your brain score or a map that shows you your meditation or your prefrontal cortex activity, but you also get to see your brain waves decomposed into the alpha, beta, theta, and delta. So you're actually able to see each of your brainwave bands and how they change over the course of your session, which is super cool.
Yes, I thought that would be really cool to actually see that data. So I was thinking, you've just released this device. It's got these new sensors on. Will you be able to upgrade the firmware so it'll be able to measure new things or like just using software to upgrade it so it can add new features?
Totally. So we actually update the firmware over the air. And it was so as we were building the new Muse S Athena, we're getting the ones from the factory. Our firmware guys were improving the firmware day after day after day. And for the first few months of the initial builds, we could only update the firmware from a computer or from a special loader. So we'd like go into the office, give it to Kate, who was managing our firmware updates. She'd update the device, we'd take it home, and we all cheered the day that David, our lead of firmware, delivered the over-the-air update. So you could just turn on your Muse app, go into the update in the firmware on your Muse app, and it would automatically update. And now you don't even need to go into the Muse app. Just anytime you update the Muse app and you open the device, turn on your Muse, it automatically updates the firmware. So as we continue to develop and innovate, the new device and the new app are both constantly updated as we deliver the new insights and the new ideas that we have.
That sounds excellent. Okay, so if we wanted to, let's think about this. No, so the application, you have thousands, well, a lot. I mean, like 500,000 or something. How many
Yeah,
how many devices do you have?
there's there's over 500,000 people that have used Muse to start or enhance their meditation practice, and about as many devices out in the wild, both in consumers' homes and in laboratories and hospitals.
I was actually, I who is your most of your customers? Are they private or is it hospitals and are they biohackers or do you know who most of your customers are?
Yeah, so it depends on on who we're looking at. So if we're looking at consumers, everyday people who are using this in their home, they skew a little bit more male, although we have a lot of females that use it. Um, a lot of biohackers. So if you consider yourself a biohacker, I mean, this is like, the prime tool to track your brain. Um, the age range is quite broad. So, we go from 18 up to 90. When we did our study on alpha peak frequency, we literally were looking at 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds who use the device, as well as people who are younger. So people find it quite easy to use, regardless of kind of how tech savvy you are. Um, and in a clinical setting, so there's a few different ways that it's used. So it's used as a meditation intervention as well as a sleep intervention. Mayo Clinic is probably one of our biggest clinical users, and they've used it for breast cancer patients awaiting surgery. They published that study in 2017, showing that it decreased stress and improved fatigue and quality of life in breast cancer patients. Um, they then did a second study in Cushing's syndrome patients, which is a stress illness, and it actually changed the endocrine values and improved markers of Cushing syndrome. Then in fibromyalgia, they did another study, and recently they just published a study in long COVID demonstrating that using Muse actually improves long COVID symptoms. So it decreased stress, anxiety, depression, and improved classic symptoms like brain fog and cognitive functions. So, like, serious improvement, and it's now part of their recommendation for their long COVID protocols.
Using Muse to help you meditate better.
Using Muse to help you meditate better and using the sleep functions Muse to help you sleep
Oh, yeah.
better improved long COVID symptoms.
Right. Yeah. Cool. So you have all these devices and you are collecting data, right, from them. Um, Could you talk about the database that you're building? I mean, it's probably going to be the biggest like EEG database in the world, you would think.
Yeah, so it actually probably is the largest EEG database in the world. And when you meditate with Muse, if you opt in to sharing your data with accredited third parties, then your data in a completely anonymized, de-aggregated, de-identified way um, gets lumped together. And it's available for scientific insights for our partners. So that's how the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation was able to do that study on the large database. Um, and it's allowed us and researchers to see patterns that you wouldn't have been able to see before. Because it's hard to have that much EEG data. So, in the study with the Mayo Clinic, um, not only did they use Muse as a meditation tool to help improve long COVID, but then they also, we did a study together looking at the EEG of individuals with long COVID, many of whom had brain fog. And we were actually able to derive a marker in the EEG of long COVID, which is able to identify long COVID with a 90% sensitivity, like very very precise. It's quite amazing. And we're able to do that because we have all this normative data around individuals prior to COVID, before long COVID existed, and the subset of individuals with long COVID who agreed through the study to share their de-identified aggregated data. And now it's providing really useful metrics for researchers and healthcare practitioners to use. Not that
Is
it
it
is used as a diagnostic. I should also, this is still in the research phase, but as it moves forward, it really enables a greater understanding of the brain for everyone.
is it getting us any closer to figuring out what long COVID is?
Yeah, so it hasn't gotten us any closer to figuring out what it is, but it's, pointed the finger at some of the things that could help and also some of the metrics that we can use to then see is something helping. So, the next step in identifying a biomarker like that is to then be able to do studies and say, did this intervention have an impact on that biomarker or not? So it gives us a clear way to be able to do science and see what's working.
Yes. Okay. So is there anything else that you see in terms of the brain with aging, in particular?
So as the brain ages, it undergoes the same processes as the rest of our body. So our vasculature starts to change. We have the same blood clots that we can get in our heart, we get in our brain. And as a result, because our brain behaves in many ways like our body as we age, the kind of interventions that we do that help our body can also help our brain. So things like having a great diet, exercising, stress management, sleeping. All of these things are not only keys to help our body improve and stave off aging, but they also help our brain improve and stave off aging. So you both want to do the classic things that we know how to do: exercise, eat well, sleep well, do all these things, um, meditate so that you reduce your stress, as well as do particularly targeted exercises for your brain to help it stave off its aging. And interestingly, it looks like meditation is one of the amazing things that you do for your brain to prevent aging, or at least cellular and cognitive aging. You can't help time moving forward, but you can stay strong while it does. In a study by Dr. Eileen Luters, she looked at long-term meditators and looked at their brain in an MRI compared to those people who didn't meditate. And what she was able to see was that long-term meditators had brains that looked on average 7.5 years younger than non-meditators. So this is really significant. The act of meditating and maintaining a meditation practice actually reverse ages your brain, like actually makes your brain look significantly younger. And her definition of a long-term meditator was somebody who'd meditated for 5 years or more. So an investment of 5 years or more produced, in some cases, a brain that looked 7.5 years younger. So it's an incredibly powerful tool to stave off the aging of your brain.
Yeah, that is amazing. We just talked, I just talked to a researcher from Australia called Dr. Tara Walker about exercise and the brain. This is what she looks at, particularly exercise and the brain. And so she said, yes, it's really important. And HIIT, high intensity, is the one that seems to release the right factors to really help the brain more than, unfortunately, more than walking. But walking is good. I mean, any exercise
Yeah,
is
so
good.
walking is still important. I mean, walking, there's nothing wrong with walking because part of what you want to do is just get your blood moving. So when you get your blood moving, you increase the oxygen perfusion to your brain. And it turns out that when you walk, you have kind of like two pumps. Every time you move your leg, it's kind of like the pump whooshing the blood through your brain and through your body. And of course, intense exercise is better because then you also get the release of BDNF and all of the growth factors. You get the improvements in your VO2 max, which allows you to overall increase your oxygen perfusion of your brain and the efficiency that your body uses. So exercise is key for your brain. And I actually once worked in a lab where we looked at degradation of the brain and we wanted to look at the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus. And so we had a population of rats and we wanted them to grow new neurons in their hippocampus. My job was to actually look under the microscope and count how many new neurons were grown. And how did we get them to grow new neurons? We put them on a running wheel with all our, amazing potions and lotions and scientific technology in the lab. The best way to get those rats to grow new neurons was to put them on a running wheel. So yes, exercise makes real change in your brain.
Yes. So meditation and this prefrontal cortex focus. So how would you compare those two? Are they, yeah, how are they different and how are they the same? Because they're both
Sure.
concentration, right?
Yep. So in the same way that when you go to a gym, or when you exercise overall, there's not just one style of exercise that you want to do. You got to mix it up. You have to walk a little bit. You have to stretch a little bit. You have to do your cardio. You have to do your weightlifting and your resistance. And doing your HIIT is really powerful. So there's many different modes of exercising your body. So too are there different modes of exercising your brain. And so when we are doing a meditation, for example, we're working out a few different pieces. One, you're increasing your alpha waves, which we described. Two, you're practicing the act of attending. So meditation is actually a very cognitive process where you're learning about your internal mental state and you're observing your thoughts. And when they wander away, you're choosing to invoke your will and not follow your wandering thought. You're building your metacognition, your ability to observe what's going on in your mind. And then you're strengthening your attention by focusing on one thing. Then, when your mind wanders again, you have to work really hard with your inhibition, another prefrontal cortex feature. And that inhibition needs to stop your body and say, in your mind, and say, nope, I'm not going to wander my mind. I'm going to bring it back to my breath and I'm going to keep my focus there. And so as you do that, you are strengthening not only your prefrontal cortex, but also all of the cognitive skills, all of the task switching, all of the metacognition that's involved in it. And while you're doing it, you're breathing deeply. So you're calming your physiology, you're calming your breath, and you are, getting your vagus nerve to bring you out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. So a ton of stuff that's going on there simultaneously. While you're doing that, you're activating your prefrontal cortex and you're probably increasing your oxygen demand. Um, but it's not the same as doing a targeted workout for it. So, in the same way that, you can go get groceries and carry those groceries home, and in the process of carrying those groceries home, you're going to get a stronger bicep because it was part of the activity that you're doing and you needed your arms to do that. When you're doing the prefrontal cortex fNIRS neurofeedback and you're really training your brain to demand more oxygen and you're training your brain to get more blood flowing through the area, you're doing a really kind of targeted and specific exercise for that part of your brain where you're reinforcing it for flooding the area with nutrients and flooding the area with oxygen, which is the primary thing that's required to create energy in your brain. The oxygen turns into ATP. Actually, in your brain, it's a little bit different, but the oxygen turns into the energy currency of your brain. And so it's, both are getting at the same thing, but from completely different directions with a host of other skills that they're building along the way. So both are very complementary.
You said eat well for the brain. Is eating well for the brain the same as eating well for everything else? I mean, yeah, because the brain is not everything gets across the blood-brain barrier, and the brain is mostly fat. So, yeah, I just wondered if it's the same things.
So it primarily is the same things. So we want to have a very low saturated fat diet because saturated fat clogs the veins and arteries of your heart, just like it's going to clog the vasculature in your brain as it builds up. So low in saturated fats, high in colorful vegetables, which contain lots of vitamins and factors that our brain needs, just like our body does. Um, our brain seems to particularly like uh, blueberries, walnuts, cherries, things high in polyphenols and anthocyanins. All of these are good for the brain. And DHA, which is a component of fish oil, of omega-3, is particularly good for the brain. It's quite good for the body, but it's particularly good for the brain because, as you referenced, our brain isn't mainly made up of fat, but there's important pieces of fat in our brain, and that is the DHA in the myelin sheath. So, your brain has a bunch of neurons. They are connected with axons and dendrites, and that's how they communicate to one another. Sometimes there's just one little connection. Sometimes the connections are bundled, just like telephone wires with a lot of bundling around them, where you're able to have fast flow of communication through those fibers. And those fibers are wrapped in something called a myelin sheath. It's kind of like the rubber outside of your telephone wire, and that allows for faster, more efficient transmission of information in those bundles. And that myelin sheath is made up of, drum roll please, DHA, the stuff that's in your fish oil. And so you want to make sure that you are eating good amounts of omega-3 fish oils because it is anti-inflammatory, which is good for your brain. And it is also made up, it is also the molecule that makes up that myelin sheath.
So, what are the next? I mean, you've just released the device, so I mean, kind of talking about the future is is a bit early. But what do you see as the next steps for the company?
Sure. So I know you said we just released the device, but yes, there's a lot that we're always working on. We'll continue to provide the brain healthy experiences that you're used to, the amazing meditation tools, the sleep tracking, the sleep support to help you fall asleep, the new Athena measures to help you increase the blood flow to your prefrontal cortex. Over time, you may see those SpO2 measures rolling out inside the app. And we're actually working on something that we provide to researchers now, which we'll also be eventually providing to the public once we move it through the pipeline. And that is the ability to detect something else in the brain called an ERP, an event-related potential. So when you see a stimulus, a light flashing, and you attend to that stimulus, you see a predictable little peak in your brain at 300 milliseconds. And the height and the strength of that peak is actually very well correlated to your cognitive function. So we have a range of tasks like the Stroop task and NBAC, which is a memory task, an oddball task, which is again an attentional task. And with each of those, we're able to measure your ERPs, your event related potentials, how strongly your brain responds in that moment. And then we're able to track, or you'll be able to track your brain over time and see that ERP result, which is currently something that only researchers use as a measure of brain function. So, many more kind of neuroscience lab technologies that we're developing that are going to flow into the app over time and
Now,
be accessible with any of the devices that you have.
that would be, yes, really cool. I have seen recently some papers, talking about brain health, and yeah, you flash a light and you see how soon this ERP happens and how strong it is. And so that's a measure of how fast the brain is reacting. Um, and
Exactly,
it's
both how quickly the brain reacts as well as how synchronously the brain reacts. So as your brain ages, it becomes desynchronized. So when your neurons are all singing lovely in an orchestra and together, everything is synchronized. Everything's working together. And so your attentional resources can all be galvanized at once. You can see something clearly, you can hear something loudly, and it all makes sense. As your brain ages, those reciprocal connections begin to not work as well. And so it's kind of like if you think about an orchestra and they're no longer really listening to each other, and now all the violins are a little out of tune, and the tuba is going a little bit at the wrong time, and you can no longer make sense of this piece of music in the same way. And so, in an ERP and an event related potential, if I show you a flash, if you get, if the orchestra gets the note like, okay, now, and now, now, and now, now, if everyone's not synced, everyone's not going to be playing together. You're not going to see the same strong peak that comes as everyone speaks at once. The peak is going to be lower and distributed because your brain is not all synchronized simultaneously as it begins to degrade its function. And so that's why ERPs become a really fascinating measure of your brain's ability to all work together simultaneously.
that sounds wonderful. I mean, it's just so good that we can now start looking at the brain with your device in a way that before we could only look at the body. I mean, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
I have so many devices for measuring my pulse or my HRV or all this, but there's almost nothing for measuring your brain right now.
Yeah, it's an honor to have been able to deliver this, both to research labs and to people, the wonderful people in our lives and in our communities to be able to use it. And, we're still early days in being able to really make an impact in tracking and training our brain, but like, bit by bit, step by step, we're getting there and making real impact in people's lives and people's health.
Yes, yeah, I had, or I have a Muse S, and I have used that, and it certainly helped me. It helped me to meditate because if nothing else, it gives you some feedback. Otherwise, you're just meditating. Am I doing well? Am I doing better than yesterday? It's like I have no idea. But on the device, you see, okay, I got more birds today than I did yesterday, so I'm getting better. Or maybe I just got better sleep. I don't know. But anyway, it does give you a sense of progress that it's much harder to see without.
Yeah, and that progress is really motivating because the biggest thing about managing your mind and body and keeping them young as time goes on is being consistent about these habits and actually doing them and finding the energy and the motivation to engage in these practices, because that's what makes you better. And if you're not engaged, you're not going to do it and you're not going to move forward.
Yes. So if anyone wants to know more about this device or the rest of your work, where can they go?
So you can always go to our website, choosemuse.com, CHOOSEMUSE.com. And choosemuse.com, you're going to find all of our studies and teardowns and breakdowns of the devices and how they work. And I believe we even have a discount code for your listeners.
We do. I think it's 15%. It will be in the description. And yes, if anyone wants to try the device, please use the discount code. Okay, Ariel, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been great talking to you again.
Thank you. It was so much fun and such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.